The Coloradans trying to block Donald Trump from the ballot got dismantled today by the Supreme Court, but they seem satisfied they tried.
No. It's never a waste to defend democracy.
Denver's evictions hit a near record in January, a time of year when fewer people tend to get kicked out. The city is going to try a new approach to keep people on the streets out of the cold. And your feedback led us to learn something new about those anti-migrant town halls popping up in the suburbs. Tonight on Next. A brutal day in front of the Supreme Court for the Coloradans who were trying to kick Donald Trump off the ballot. All signs point to them losing, Trump winning, and they might not get a single Supreme Court justice to back up their argument. Our Marshall Zellinger joins us after being inside the Supreme Court chambers today. And Marshall, this was a legal long shot, they knew, but it doesn't look like it's going to come close.
Kyle, it was clear to me that several of the liberal-minded justices were either not on board or not convinced with the arguments being made inside the Supreme Court today. And I'll tell you, when you start hearing justices who are ideologically opposed start tag-teaming questions, it's not a good sign if you're Norma Anderson or the 5 other Colorado voters trying to kick Trump off the ballot.
This is very personal to me. I've lived a hell of a long time.
In all her 91 years, Norma Anderson has never experienced this.
It was the first experience for me to sit in front of the Supremes.
Putting her name on the lawsuit that led to today's U.S. Supreme Court hearing even got her immortalized in colored pencil.
They ask a lot of questions.
The majority of the justices, even the liberal ones, asked pointed questions about Colorado courts making a decision for other states to replicate or abuse.
Why should a single state have the ability to make this determination, not only for their own citizens, but for the rest of the nation?
That it just doesn't seem like a state call.
Do you agree that the state's powers here over its ballot for a federal officer election have to come from some constitutional authority?
Members of this court have disagreed about that.
I'm asking you.
The justices seem skeptical in their direct questions of the attorney representing Anderson's side.
Well, Marshall, when I would have somebody present a bill in front of me, I would do the same thing. And they'd never know how I was going to vote.
The Republican elephant in the room was really in Florida. Former President Trump reacted to the Supreme Court case far from D.C.
You have millions of people that are out there wanting to vote, and they happen to want to vote for me or the Republican Party, or whatever you want to, however you want to phrase it.
And the justices' questions and body language suggest Trump will have the opportunity to receive votes. During the argument, conservative Justice Samuel Alito reclined in his chair for extended periods of time. And even liberal Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson seemed to be frustrated with the answers she received. So if Anderson does not win, was this effort a complete waste of her time?
No. It's never a waste to defend democracy.
Anderson sees the best in people, and she suggests that the justices were just curious and we shouldn't be so quick to figure out maybe which way they're voting. Kyle, I promised a sketch from inside the courtroom because I was told media seats were obstructive view, so in between taking notes, I just did a little something here. Just kidding, this is from Bill Hennessy, the courtroom sketch artist, but just look at the bottom left. I noticed in his sketch, he sketched me drawing my sketch, which I'm too embarrassed to show you.
Well, how about that? You got a view of history here today. You know, Marshall, there was the question of does this clause in the 14th Amendment apply to Donald Trump and his actions on January 6th? And you had a lot of people on TV say, well, yes, they do, or no, it doesn't. And there's really only one way to find out, which is to take it to the courts. They've taken it to the courts, and from the sounds of things, they're going to get a pretty definitive answer.
Perhaps, but part of the Trump's team argument was you can be an insurrectionist, but they didn't say that former President Trump was, but they said you could be an insurrectionist, win an election, and still take office, perhaps as long as Congress makes a determination by the time you take office that you're no longer an insurrectionist. I think they also left it open that if that's what the voters want to decide, to put an insurrectionist in office now, that's up to the voters to decide. But that part's still going to be muddy if that ever comes to pass.
What is the opposite of the phrase, what a time to be alive? Whatever the opposite of that phrase is what I was thinking when you were just saying, what if people want an insurrectionist in office? All right, Marshall Zellinger, big day at the Supreme Court. Thank you for breaking it down. Colorado's Democratic Secretary of State, Jenna Griswold, sounded a hopeful note after today's hearing. It's not clear if Griswold genuinely believes that the case could still go the way of the anti-Trump contingent, or if she was going to say this even if they did go in there and get depanced.
I think it's just so outrageous that Trump continues to think that he is above the law, above the Constitution, and above the court system. I'm hopeful the justices will look at the facts with an open mind and make a big decision for the United States to protect our democracy from the danger of another Trump.
Trump presidency there. We're always asked this very good question by Next viewers every time this comes up. If, for some reason, the Supreme Court allows Colorado to block Trump's appearance on the ballot, Griswold says write-in votes would not be counted for him by her office. So, on occasion, there will be moments in politics that are truly laugh-out-loud funny. And I laughed out loud today when I saw our partners at Colorado Politics report that the Colorado Republicans who have spread conspiracy theories about Denver's Dominion voting systems might use Dominion voting systems for their Republican Party assembly. The same Dominion that has been falsely smeared as rigging elections, the same Dominion that won a $787 million defamation claim against Fox News, the Dominion that disgraced former Trump attorney Jenna Ellis suggested swung races in Colorado, that Republicans, including Chair Dave Williams there, might use that same Dominion voting systems to count the votes at their party assembly elections. The Republican county clerk in El Paso County, where the assembly would be held, he's no election denier himself. He told Colorado Politics, quote, "The irony is rich." Evictions did not get better after the worst part of the pandemic. Now, with people back to work, eviction numbers have actually increased. Denver saw the second highest month on record in January. Our Angeline McCall looks at why.
In a city where people can't afford to live, more people are leaving their homes, not by choice, but because of eviction.
We saw the second highest number of evictions on record in January.
Alina Rodriguez says the trends this year worry her and her team at the Community Economic Defense Project.
People just cannot keep up, and I think that is why we're in this crisis right now.
2023 surpassed records with the highest number of evictions in 1 year. 12,910 people were evicted in 2023, over 1,500 evictions already in the first month of the new year.
Which, if you pace that out, looks like probably around 18,000 evictions in 2024.
Meaning 2024 could surpass the past year, potentially having the highest number of evictions ever.
What we've seen is things are sort of as bad, if not worse, than we anticipated. Coming into the end of last year, the cold season, the holidays, numbers were not slowing down.
Rodriguez says we need a different tool, other than having eviction, to solve the high housing costs, low wages, and cost of living.
I think it's just really hard to cut it, to make a family budget that includes rent, that includes healthcare, that includes your gas in your car, and all of that right now. While that is hard enough, it is extremely easy and fast to evict somebody in Colorado.
Rodriguez is hoping that this legislative session could potentially add more protections for renters, with some upcoming bills expected to be introduced, such as the for-cause eviction bill. It would change the requirements to evict someone because, according to Rodriguez, even if you are $1 behind on rent, you could be evicted.
A lot of the Democrats at the Capitol like that kind of thing. Democratic Governor Jared Polis does not like that kind of thing. He suggested that basically anything that you put on landlords ultimately will raise rents, whether that's rent control or anything else, and he suggested he might not be down with that.
Yeah, and you can see, right, that there's this idea of balance, right? If we do this, does this happen? But at the end of the day, what is happening is that more people are getting evicted, and rental assistance, even though it's available, it's becoming available later down the stages, meaning that even if someone's eligible to receive those funds, sometimes they can't get it in time to actually prevent that eviction from happening.
Yeah, as you rightly note, there's the hypotheticals, and then there's the situation on the ground. Angeline, thank you. So it looks like state legislators are going to approve nearly $10 million for grants for communities who are welcoming migrants across the state. That's about what Denver has received from the state so far, though it's still far short of the expenses being racked up in care for migrants. This state funding approved by the House today is a mix of state dollars and reallocated federal dollars. The state's Department of Public Safety made an emergency request for the funds in December and said that they're going to go to, quote-unquote, community-based organizations helping migrants in places like Denver and Carbondale. Leaders on both the state and the local level have said that the funding really needs to be coming from the federal government because it's the feds who have responsibility for the border crisis. So far, Denver alone has spent more than $42 million providing services and has been approved for about $10 million in federal reimbursement. So we are getting some feedback tonight about the anti-migrant town hall held in Lakewood this week. A couple of sharp-eyed Next viewers, including Michael and Joe, noticed that the flyer promoting the Lakewood town hall on the right, the flyer with the false claims that Lakewood was going to house thousands of migrants in schools, that flyer was nearly identical to the one on the left, a flyer for an anti-migrant town hall in Wheat Ridge back in December. Now, the organizers of the Lakewood one tried to stay anonymous, but we found out through public records it was the head of the GOP Republican Party that put it together. So we put in an open records request to see who reserved the Wheat Ridge Rec Center for the anti-migrant town hall there. Wouldn't you know, it was the vice chair of the GOP Republican Party. Denver is going to launch a week-long experiment that could change the way the city helps people living on the streets during freezing weather. And before we rush to judgment on what wolves mean to Colorado, there are researchers who have looked at similar situations for 20 years, and they say that's not enough time to judge. The couple accused of leaving nearly 200 bodies to decay in a funeral home in southern Colorado might get off with probation. John and Carrie Halford, owners of the Return to Nature Funeral Home in Penrose, face more than 200 charges. Prosecutors said today they'll be tried together. They're expected to plead not guilty next month. Every charge they face is eligible for probation. Last month, the judge significantly reduced their bonds from $2 million apiece to $100,000. John's out on bond. Carrie's still in custody. DA says that 22 bodies from that funeral home still have not been identified. As cold weather approaches this weekend, Denver's going to open a round-the-clock shelter at the Coliseum. The mayor says this is a compromise with City Council after he shot down their effort to ban sweeps during freezing weather. The Coliseum will be open for a full week from 3 p.m. tomorrow to 9 a.m. next Friday. It's a major shift from Denver's current model of opening overnight-only shelters when it gets real cold. The mayor says this is a pilot to determine whether the city could open up a cold weather shelter every time the temps are below freezing instead of waiting for the current threshold of 20 degrees. City Council tabled a proposal to do that earlier this year, but then passed a bill to ban sweeps during freezing weather. The mayor vetoed that. He said that it hurts the city's ability to force people indoors during dangerous weather. Kathy Sabin's watching the weather coming our way this weekend.
That's right, Kyle. We're in between storm systems today. One rolled through yesterday, another one on the way. It's calm out there after a day with sunshine and 50s, but colder weather will start to move in tomorrow along with the snow. And Denver goes under a winter storm watch this time tomorrow. High avalanche danger in the high country, more mountain snow. Things to consider if your travel takes you up into the high country where we've had 1 to 2 feet of snow. And even though the radar isn't showing a lot of snow now, that will be changing in the next 6 to 12 hours. Isolated rain showers just like yesterday out on the eastern plains. Kind of neat for February. This is the winter storm watch that includes areas north of Colorado Springs, Denver, up to Fort Collins through Saturday evening. Winter storm warning in the southern mountains and advisories for another 4 to 8 inches of snow through the central and southwest mountains where avalanche danger is incredibly high. So really need to pay attention to the signs and just know your travel plans up there and stay out of the backcountry. In Denver, you might be able to ski in downtown Denver depending upon where those snow bands set up. It's looking like a 3 to 6 inch snow event for Denver with slightly heavier amounts west and south. The isolated showers tonight move out. We'll get some clearing. Temperatures will drop into the 20s. We have a mostly cloudy, windy, and colder day tomorrow with occasional snow showers. The accumulation starts late in the day and continues into Saturday. So no real issues tonight. And your 7-day forecast includes those occasional snow showers on Friday. 3 to 6 inches of snow by the time the storm winds down Saturday night. Super Bowl Sunday is sunny and mild, and we're back to sunshine and maybe 52 degrees by Thursday of next week.
We've known for a long time, that if you pull predators out of ecosystems, that big changes can happen.
Could take decades for states like Colorado to understand how wolves impact nature here. And Marshall Fire survivors in Superior get another year to rebuild with government help. 2 years after the Marshall Fire, less than half of the people who lost homes in Superior are back. And as that recovery drags on, Superior is extending financial assistance for another year. The rebates are for homeowners who completely lost their homes, not for those who are just repairing damage. The town will rebate 47% of building permit fees and a portion of state sales and use taxes. The rebates go as high as $28,000 for homes valued at $1 million or more. The program was set to end this month, but with so many people still away, the town is extending it through March of next year. If you're waiting for definitive proof of what the reintroduction of wolves is going to mean for Colorado, you need to set a timer for the year 2050. CSU researchers just wrapped up a 20-year study into the benefits of reintroducing predators to an ecosystem, and they say even 2 decades is not enough time to gauge the full impact. Their research is based out of Yellowstone, where the apex predators, the wolves, cougars, and grizzlies, were missing for decades. And without those predators, elk ran wild and started overgrazing. And CSU researchers say that completely transformed the wildlife and vegetation in the area. Those are not elk. You and I both know it. The study's lead author says bringing wolves and other predators back has been beneficial to the landscape because they've helped rein in the elk. But even in 20 years' time, researchers have not seen a dramatic change in the landscape.
Ecosystems that have apex predators in them do tend to be healthier than those that don't. It's just we should not expect the restoration of predators to an ecosystem after a long absence to quickly repair the harm that was done by their absence.
The CSU researchers say they haven't decided whether they believe that the ecosystem will be fully restored a couple decades into the future. Some good news on that front for Colorado. CSU says that the absence of wolves here has not created such drastic impacts on our ecosystem, but it still could be a long time before we see if there are those particular benefits of reintroduction. We'll have your feedback. Gracias. We'll have your feedback next. Making a sports car sportier is the most Colorado thing we saw today. Paulette and Fred spotted it in Longmont. You know what? If you're taking a ski trip, why not take the Porsche? I didn't know that you could get a Thule on a Porsche, but apparently you can. That's also a very clean car for where it's headed. If you see something that says Colorado to you, send it our way. Email next@9news.com. I inquired earlier in the program, what is the opposite of what a time to be alive? And a texter says that the opposite is, what fresh hell is this? And David says it's shoot me now, which is actually kind of dark, but probably accurate. Then this via text. Wondering if you news guys agree that some clarity about the 14th Amendment and how it applies to Trump was needed. This viewer continues, the Colorado case did that or will soon. I believe that's a good thing. Surprised you folks just want to spin up more political controversy. I think that's exactly what I said when Marshall's story ended, that even if the Coloradans trying to take Trump off the ballot, get Dikembe Mutombo swatted out of the Supreme Court, that clarity is worthwhile.